everybody, and welcome back to another Bible study. You may notice a change in scenery. My wife installed a plant behind me. Actually, she did it for something she was recording, not for the decor of my Bible studies. I'm not sure I like it. It brings too much life, and happiness to these videos. And why would we want that? We're going to talk about, speaking of lack of happiness, let's talk about the people of Israel and the people of Jerusalem in today's video. We are in 2 Kings chapter 18. We're going to talk about how the Assyrian Empire conquered the nation of Israel and deported them. And then a little bit later on, they moved down to Judah and they're threatening the city of Jerusalem. That's what we're talking about today. As always, you can get the free PDF on our website. You can download it for yourself, save it on your computer, on your phone, whatever. Let's talk first, when did these events happen? We're going to talk about King Hezekiah. Hezekiah's reign probably fits within the window of 730 to 695 BC. He reigned for 29 years in Judah, so almost 3 decades. The character section, we've got 3 today. First is Hezekiah. He is the king of Judah. He was the son of Ahaz. And then Sennacherib, the king of the Assyrian Empire. And then we have a guy named the Rabshakeh. Now that's not his name. I'm probably not pronouncing that right. This appears to be a title given to an officer in the Assyrian Empire, and in this case, in the military. So this Rabshakeh guy was an Assyrian military officer who threatened Jerusalem and Hezekiah, and we'll talk more about him in our outline. Now, if you remember, chapter 17 was quite important because we talked about the deportation of the people of Israel from their land. Their capital was Samaria. We'll briefly mention that in this chapter, so it's good to know where Samaria is. Now, we're going down south mainly to spend most of our time in this chapter. We're going to Judah. Their capital was Jerusalem. The Assyrian king sent messengers and an army to Jerusalem to threaten the city and try to get King Hezekiah to surrender. The first thing we need to talk about in chapter 18 is Hezekiah becoming king of Judah. This is verses 1 through 8. So Hezekiah became king of the southern kingdom when he was 25 years old, and as we mentioned, he reigned for 29 years. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, to a greater degree than any of the kings of Judah who came before him, according to verse 5. He was like King David in that way. He even removed the high places from Judah, which were those places where unauthorized sacrifices were offered. An interesting detail that we're told is that he destroyed the bronze serpent that Moses had created way back in the wilderness in Numbers chapter 21, verse 8. This serpent was made by Moses because, remember, the people complained in the wilderness. God sent these poisonous serpents into the camp. And so Moses built this bronze serpent, and anyone who looked at the bronze serpent would be healed from the snake bites. Right? But it turned out that over the centuries, this bronze serpent had become essentially like an idol to the people. They had even given it a name, and that was Nehushtan. Well, Hezekiah doesn't want this being an idol in Judah, and so he takes quite the bold move of destroying this centuries-old serpent so that the people couldn't worship it anymore, and they could only worship God in the way that he prescribed. God blessed Hezekiah, and he helped him. Hezekiah fought against the Philistines, and he defeated them. He also rebelled against the Assyrian Empire. Now, verses 9 through 12, I've got the section heading as Israel is taken captive to Assyria. If you were with us for the last chapter, you know all about that. But if you weren't, this is just like a very quick summary of what went on there. These verses give a short summary of the king of Assyria bringing his army to Samaria, besieging the city, conquering it, and then deporting the people of Israel all throughout the Assyrian Empire, spread across hundreds and hundreds of miles. And God allowed the Assyrians to do this to the northern kingdom of Israel because they were wicked continually. They had a problem with worshiping idols, and they just refused to listen to God's instructions and his calls for repentance. So we see Assyria attacking Israel and conquering it. Now, some years later, they come against Judah. In Hezekiah's 14th year as king, Sennacherib of Assyria attacked Judah. And Hezekiah agreed to pay the king of Assyria a large sum of money to basically appease him to go away. He paid him 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold so that he would withdraw his troops and leave the city of Jerusalem. Hezekiah actually had to strip the gold off of the doors of the temple in order to come up with this money. But after receiving the money, the king of Assyria seems to have broken his promise. He sent his officers to Jerusalem to threaten King Hezekiah and the city. One of the officers, who is called the Rabshakeh, he stood outside of the city and he spoke to Hezekiah's men from the wall. He mocked Judah, he mocked Jerusalem, calling them weak, and he ridiculed them for trying to make an alliance with Egypt. The Rabshakeh spoke very loudly so that everyone on the wall could hear him, and he told them not to put their trust in Hezekiah or to put their trust in the Lord, Hezekiah's God. He actually mocked God, comparing him to all of the other gods of the lands who had failed to protect their people from the mighty Assyrian army. The Rabshakeh was essentially trying to scare Jerusalem into surrendering, quickly. We will see how Jerusalem, and more importantly, how the Lord responds to this blasphemy, essentially, in chapter 19. For the application today, I want to return to Hezekiah's actions and what he did to the temple in order to appease a pagan king. The temple had been built 2 centuries before these events happened, and during those 2 centuries, we've already talked about several things that happened to the temple. It had been neglected, right? Had to be repaired several times. It doesn't seem like those repairs were ever fully accomplished. The altar had been swapped for the design of a pagan altar by one of Judah's own kings. The temple was falling into ruin. It was falling apart. The treasures of the temple had several times been plundered by the kings of Judah to pay off foreign powers who were pressuring them and oppressing them. And also the bronze basin, which had been magnificently designed during Solomon's day, had been desecrated again by a king of Judah. Why was this the fate of the temple that was once so magnificent? It was largely because of outside influence, outside pressure. The altar had been swapped because of pagan influence. The temple had been plundered. The gold of the temple is now being stripped off of the doors because there's this pressure coming from these outside nations because the people of Judah aren't listening to God. After 2 centuries of this outside pressure, the temple probably wasn't even recognizable as the magnificent structure that it once was when it was built. This danger also exists in the church, and that's that we are going to strip the church of everything that makes it the church because of outside pressure, because of pagan influence, the influence of the world, the influence of the ungodly. If we strip the church of its essential doctrines and everything that makes it special, and we stop following God's commands every time somebody calls us intolerant or bigoted or misogynistic or mean or hateful, then our churches will just be a sad shell of the glorious church that Jesus died for, like a temple that's been stripped of everything that made it beautiful.